everyone, and thank you very much for having me tonight present on this very important topic. I'm presenting from Vancouver, which is on the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'd like to extend my thanks to the BC Muslim Association for organizing this, and I think this is a very important conversation that we can have on this important topic. Today, I'm here to speak to you about hate crimes, and I will share a presentation in a minute, but I wanted to be the first to let everyone know, and I'm putting it in the chat box. But there are a couple of recent releases that I'm not sure if people have, but there was a crowdsourcing survey that was done, and I'll just put it here for everyone. During the pandemic on hate crimes, and you can see that right there, I've put it in for you. And also StatsCan just released their numbers for 2020. And so I thought that would be of interest to everyone. So that's what I'm putting in the chat box for you this year. So there's always a 1-year lapse on the release of hate crimes. And we did do a very unusual thing as a police department to be releasing such contemporary type stats throughout of last year because of this very concerning trend that we were having around anti-East Asian crime. And that's kind of unusual because there's usually about a year lapse. So I'm just going to share my presentation. I think I'm one of the people right now who can't share because someone else might be sharing. But here we go. I've got my presentation. Let me just get it started here. All right.
Yeah,
and then I'll just get, yep, perfect. And then I'll just get that in presentation mode for everyone to see. And I'll start at the beginning because it's always good to start at the beginning. All right, so I'm in the Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigenous Relations section. We have a few positions within the section, and one of which is the hate crime investigator, which is Gagan Ledoux, who is here tonight in attendance, and the inspector is Inspector Terry Young. So I'm glad to be here with them tonight. Tonight, what I'll do is I'll give you a brief statistical overview so that you have an understanding of what the situation is here in the city of Vancouver, describe the hate crime investigator role. I'll go into a bit what a hate crime is versus an incident so that we have like working definitions. I'll talk about the applicable criminal code of Canada sections, some of the legal challenges, and certainly what community can do to assist on this issue. And community is actually a very important aspect of combating hate, and specifically when it's targeting so many different communities within the city of Vancouver. So I'd like to start by saying that we don't have a lot of information on hate crimes. And what I mean by prevalence is how much is actually occurring. And I have no doubt that there is far more occurring than that is reporting to us. And that's a big concern. And what we can start with is, as a basis, is in 2014, they did a general social survey, which is a victimization survey, where they did ask questions about hate crime. And they did come up with about 300,000 incidents, which is a huge number if you think about it. And in that same year, there were only about 1,295 reported to police across Canada. So we see right here that there is a very big difference about what people are thinking is happening and what's actually reported to the police. There's many explanations for this, which I won't get into tonight, but some of which are as simple as people don't know that they might have been a target of a crime. They may not feel that police can do very much, or they just move on. But as the previous presenter has mentioned, it's important to report absolutely everything that you even suspect might be related to hate, prejudice, or bias, because we are seeing that violence associated to hate. And this is very concerning, specifically around places of worship. So from a community perspective, anytime you can actually encourage community to make those reports, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, this is a very complex statistics, but we'll get through it. The dotted line is kind of a forecast. So if we continue at the rate that we are currently going, we will see a slight decrease from last year. The red bars are what's occurring in 2021. So you could see at the beginning of the year, I was actually quite concerned because we were seeing a higher amount of reported hate crimes than we were seeing in 2020. And I was like, oh my God, this is getting quite serious. And then you can see what happened during the pandemic. It's basically in April that we saw that very significant uptake. And if you follow that dark blue bar, that's how high it went. And by the end of the year, we had over about 280 hate crimes reported to us. So I'm thinking if we continue in our current trend, it will be about 250. Now, certainly anything can change that very, very quickly. So don't hold me to those numbers. There could be something that happens next week, which we could see a very serious uptake in hate crime. So we're always monitoring those numbers very, very closely. During the pandemic, I want to say we picked up on it quite early on. It was in early mid-March that we actually were seeing a very concerning trend. And as a police department, we came out reporting about it just at the beginning of April, which is far ahead of any other police department in the country. And you'll note from the statistics that have been released by the Statistic Canada is that there are parts of Canada that had higher increases than we did even see in British Columbia. So we in Vancouver had a 97% overall increase in our hate crimes, which means that we went from 142 incidents reported to us in 2019 to 280 in 2020. What was most concerning was this a very significant increase in East Asian, anti-East Asian hate crimes. And you've seen this number, which was 717%. And in raw numbers, that means we went from 12 such incidents in 2019 to 98. But what was even more concerning about that increase is that the violent trend. So typically, many of the hate incidents that we see aren't as violent related as they were during the pandemic. And so what we saw, 27 assaults in 2019, it went up to 74 in 2020. So that's certainly an extremely concerning trend. So of those 280 incidents, 198 were criminal code offenses. And I'll make the distinguishment between what a criminal code offense is and an incident in the next couple of slides. And for those 198 criminal code offenses, 41 cases did go to Crown Counsel with charges recommended, and 21 of those Crown Counsel reports were related to assault charges. And when we start looking at clearance rates, that is a fairly high clearance rate for those types of offenses. So we did well on clearing many of those cases to charge. Another thing we did during the pandemic is we enacted a hate crime project team. And there was a team commander that was overseeing, and the team commander has the ability to bring additional resources. And so this was created in May 2020. And we did a lot of different things as part of that project. We brought in a crime analyst who tracks linkages and persons of interest. So a smaller incident will be actually compared and contrast to other incidents to see if we have commonalities in those cases. We liaised with ECOM, which is the agency that receives 911 calls and dispatches to various police of jurisdiction, including Vancouver Police. And they enacted a policy that all calls that come into their center that has hate, prejudice, or bias actually be turned into a call for service. And that's not just for the Vancouver Police Department. They've done that for all of their client agencies. So we did have much more far-reaching impact on that part of things. And then we enacted internal report mechanisms where all these calls do get created into a general occurrence report, which is then reviewed by our hate crime investigator. And then we enhanced our interdepartmental processes for investigations, which means we liaise with Dave's team and other teams across the organization to ensure that when we needed further investigation on cases that our hate crime investigator needed assistance on, that there was other units that were engaged to put that case forward. And the Chinese Cultural Center is one of those cases that the property crime unit actually forwarded to Crown on our behalf, so that we would have that investigative support. And we created an internal video that was distributed to all of our members on hate crimes. Now, the hate crime investigator does review all related incidents and does investigative follow-up and liaises with the designated Crown and BC hate crime. And so we have safety planning for victims and victim care. And we also do a lot of community outreach and education. So we do have good contacts across many jurisdictions through our hate crime investigator. Now, just to get into the definitions, we've actually adopted a very broad definition of hate crimes that includes both criminal and non-criminal incidents. And these are all incidents that are reported to us that are motivated by hate, prejudice, or bias. Now, there is within the Criminal Code of Canada what's referred to as hate propaganda sections, and that's section 318 and 319 of the Criminal Code of Canada. And those are extremely rare instances. We also have mischief to religious properties and all of the associated buildings, including community centers. And that would be section 430 sub 401. And we have what's referred to as sentencing provisions, and I'll describe that a little bit more, which is section 718 sub 2. And that's at the discretion of the judiciary when they actually will apply that aggravating circumstances to an incident. And we also investigate all of these non-criminal incidents that could actually lead to much more serious situations. So we have these sections that I've referred to as the hate propaganda sections, which are section 318, extremely rare in Canada, very rarely applied. We have public incitement of hatred and willful promotion of hatred. And these are actually also extremely rare, and they're bounded by section 2B of the Charter of Rights. And there's a lot of case law around here, and it actually can be quite limiting in the prosecution of these cases. And certainly there is a call across Canada to have these particular section reviewed so that the police have further powers in this type of area that is very, very concerning. Crimes motivated by hate are different. These are things like assault or criminal harassment or mischief, where the motivation is expressed through acts, gestures, or words that occur either before, during, or after the incident that really determine the fact that we have a crime, like an assault, that's actually motivated by hate. At which time we have that sentencing provision that we can recommend to the judiciary to look at this particular aggravating circumstances at sentencing. And very difficult to track because this is usually occurring in the provincial courts, say for simple assaults. And so these are not written decisions. These are just decisions that apply at sentencing. Supreme Court decisions are in fact written, and so we can review those. And those are extremely rare, and so we don't see those very often. An identifiable group for reference is defined under section 318 sub 4, which is the advocating genocide section, and it's anyone distinguished by race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation or gender expression, identity or expression, or any other similar factors. So we look at all of the cases that fit this definition, and in fact, some cases that don't fit this definition, to ensure that we're not missing anything. Hate incidents, we investigate all of these, and these include non-criminal matters. So that could be a suspicious person, that could be a mental health apprehension, a neighbor dispute, all of these smaller incidents that we really want to look at carefully to see that there are no linkages, and also determine what the trends are within community and what kind of hateful incidents are occurring in society. So as I've mentioned, our charge approval standard is high for those hate propaganda sections. We do have to get Attorney General approval on search warrants, and so they're quite complex. And the offenders who are out there doing hate crime propaganda are very aware of the both the statutory defenses, but also previous cases and the what bounds the expression. And so they touch right at the boundaries of what is permitted. So those can be very difficult to prosecute. Online investigations, if you heard, or have their unique challenges and do cross borders. Other options are sometimes very effective, specifically human rights, and BC Human Rights is looking, at hate crimes right now. And it's a different set of standards. It's a civil standard, so it's a balance of probability as opposed beyond a reasonable doubt. So within BC Human Rights, we do have some good options. And so I'd encourage people to look at those options and advocate for those options. What can community do? Number one is be a good witness. That is the most important thing. Call 911 if it's happening and you want the police there right away. Encourage people to report if they are a victim or they're telling you about something important. Encourage them to report. Create those support mechanisms as you are doing right here tonight. Advocate for change. BC Human Rights right now is undergoing an inquiry into hate crimes. Help educate the public and bring clarity to the topic, because we aren't very clear on the topic. This is a very complex area of the law that exits the Criminal Code of Canada and enters into human rights. And so that overlap is quite unique. And so any kind of clarity that can be brought to the topic, such as forums like tonight, are extremely useful. And this ends my presentation, and I can certainly take questions and will remain online to do so.